Java constructor. We will be talking about Java constructor in this lecture. So at the end of this lecture, students will be able to apply different types of constructor in the real world problem. Initialize the data members of the class using constructor. So what is a constructor? Basically, constructor it is a special type of method used to initialize the object. If no constructor defined, still we have a default constructor present in the JVM. So basically there are two types of constructors, default constructor and parameterized constructor. There are basically two rules to define the constructor. Constructor name must be same as the class name, and constructor do not have any return value, not even void. So we are not going to write down void also in constructor, and constructor name and class name has to be same. These are the two rules you have to follow. Now we can see that how to define a class name, and a opening bracket, closing bracket, we write down all the statements. So if we want to make a class rectangle, we can write down as class rectangle, and we know that the data members for rectangle is length and width. So if we see a rectangle, for every rectangle we have length and width. So we are defining the two data members as int length, width, and we want to initialize the values of this length width for every rectangle. So here I am defining a default rectangle constructor. Rectangle bracket open close, length equal to 5 and width equal to 10. No return type has been given over here for rectangle. You can see rectangle class name is rectangle, constructor name is also rectangle, and we have initialized the length and width, the data members of the class rectangle. They are the instance variables of the class rectangle. Basically, if we do not define this rectangle default constructor, then length and width will be initialized to 0. That is the default value for integer. So there are two types of constructors, default constructor and parameterized constructor. In Java, a constructor is used to be a default constructor if it does not have any parameters. Default constructor can be either user defined or provided by JVM. So in our example, we have written a constructor, so that is a user defined constructor, but if we do not write down the constructor, by default length and width will be defined to 0 as they are integers. Parameterized constructor, the constructor that has parameter is known as parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor is used to provide different values to distinct objects. So I can pass two values, I can pass single value, I can pass different data types, I can have integer, character, whatever I want to pass in the constructor, I can pass. Based on the type of parameters I pass, the particular constructor will get invoked. So here we can see a very simple example of a rectangle class where we have defined class rectangle. The variables defined instance variables defined over here are length and width. Both are integer in our example. So here we have defined a default constructor rectangle where length equal to 5 and width equal to 10. And the second constructor we are defining is a parameterized constructor where again the constructor name is rectangle, and in bracket we are passing two values, int L, int W. We are passing two values. We are initializing length to L and width to W. So in the main method we can see demo class. When we are creating the object as rectangle R1 equal to new rectangle, a default constructor is getting invoked, because we can see that in rectangle class we can see that here in this case there is no parameter pass. So by default a default constructor gets invoked, and length and width is initialized to 5 and 10. So we can see that for R1 the length is initialized as 5 and width is initialized as 10. We are trying to call R1 dot calculate area. We are trying to call the area or calculate area method of this rectangle class. So in this method we are trying to calculate the area length into width, and we are trying to return that area which we are printing in this statement system.out.println, and we can see in the output area equal to 50 will get printed. In the second case, second object when it is getting created, it is rectangle R2 equal to new rectangle 2 comma 8. Now as we are passing two parameters, both the parameters are integer. So the constructor with parameterized constructor will get invoked, which has two parameters as integer. So here the matching constructor is rectangle int L comma int W. So length will be initialized to 2 and width will be initialized to 8 in case of rectangle R2. And we can see in the figure over here, R2 has length equal to 2 and width equal to 8. And as we calculate the area of rectangle 2, it will be 8 multiplied by 2, that is 16. So we are getting the answer as 16. So in this example, we can see two types of constructor, parameterized as well as default constructor. And we are trying to invoke those constructor based on the calling of the constructor. If nothing has been passed, a default constructor is getting called. And if some parameters are passed, the matching constructor with the same type of parameters is getting invoked.